Welcome, dear friends, to a peaceful journey through the enchanting world of Steven Universe, a universe that has captured the hearts of so many with its rich lore, beautiful fusions, and the journey of self discovery. Tonight, we'll be drifting through 3 hours of stories, exploring the history of the crystal gems, the mysteries surrounding Stephen's origins, the bonds of friendship and love, and the powerful themes of identity, healing, and transformation that run deep within this universe. We'll uncover the legends of rose quartz, the struggles with the diamonds, and the quiet moments of growth and understanding that shape each character's path. As you settle in, let the soft glow of the stars and the calm rhythm of the night guide you. Take a deep breath, feel your body relax, and allow the world of Steven Universe to wrap you in a gentle embrace. Let the soothing stories of these beloved characters guide you softly towards rest. And as you listen, may your mind find peace and your heart be at ease. And if you find comfort in these stories, you're always welcome to subscribe and softly share where you're listening from tonight. Now, let us begin and let the stars of Steven Universe gently guide us into a world of dreams. In the beginning, before the earth took on its vibrant colors and melodies, there was only the quiet hum of the universe's creation. The stars, distant and soft, whispered the stories of all that would come to be, and it was in this vast, slow dance of celestial bodies that the crystal gems were born. The gems are ancient beings, their origins tied to the core of the universe itself. They are not made of flesh and blood, but of light and energy, crystalline in form, each one a reflection of the power that flows through the cosmos. It is said that long before Earth became a cradle for life, the gems existed in the far reaches of the universe, scattered across different planets, each with a purpose that aligned with their very essence. The story of the crystal gems begins with the creation of Homeworld, a place of cold beauty, where gems were forged, trained, and assigned to specific roles. Homeworld was a place of order and structure, but also one of rigid control and unyielding rules. The gems had no freedom. Their purpose was determined by their gem type, their role within the system. It was a life of servitude to the Diamond Authority, and each gem was shaped by their place in this world. But not all gems were content to live this way. Among them was a unique gem, one whose spirit would change everything. Her name was Rose Quartz. Rose Quartz was not like the others. She was a warrior, yes, but she was also a dreamer. She was not satisfied with the way things were on Homeworld, not satisfied with the rigid structure that held everything in place. Rose felt a pull, a deep yearning to fight for something more, something better for all of the gems who lived under the thumb of the diamonds. She longed for freedom, for peace, for a world where the gems could make their own choices and create their own destinies. And so, the rebellion began. Rose Quartz stood against the diamonds, defying their oppressive rule. It was not a fight that began with violence, but rather one born from the desire for something different. She gathered others who shared her vision, gems who, like her, wanted more than to be controlled by the rigid structures of Homeworld. There was Garnet, a fusion, who represented the union of two distinct souls, each with their own strength and wisdom. There was Amethyst, a free-spirited gem who, despite her playful nature, carried the weight of her past struggles. And then there was Pearl, a gem whose devotion to Rose was unwavering, a gem who had once been a servant but had found purpose and strength in the rebellion. Together, they became the crystal gems. The birth of the crystal gems was not an explosion of violence, but a quiet, determined movement, a movement rooted in the idea that every gem deserved the chance to be who they truly were. They were not just soldiers or warriors, they were individuals with desires, with dreams, with a deep yearning to exist in a world where they could truly be free. In the beginning, their mission was simple: to protect Earth, a planet rich in life and beauty. Earth was the one place where the gems could forge a future of their own, free from the control of the diamonds. Rose quartz and the crystal gems made it their mission to protect the Earth from the forces that sought to control it, and to help the gems who had been forced into servitude to find their own voices. The Earth itself, with its lush forests, sparkling oceans, and vast skies, became their sanctuary. It was a place where they could learn what it meant to be more than their gem types, more than their original purposes. The Earth was a canvas, and the crystal gems were the artists, painting a future that was filled with freedom, creativity, and life. But the path was not without obstacles. The diamonds, whose rule was absolute and unchallenged for eons, could not stand to let the crystal gems succeed. They sent their forces to Earth to quash the rebellion and reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Yet time and time again, the crystal gems stood firm, protecting Earth with all their might. It was not just a fight for freedom, it was a fight for the very soul of the gems, for their right to exist in a way that honored who they truly were. Through every battle, every struggle, the bond between the crystal gems grew stronger. They were no longer just a group of rebels, they were a family forged through trust, through love, and through the unwavering belief that a better world was possible. And so, the crystal gems became the protectors of Earth, vowing to safeguard its beauty and its life against the forces that sought to destroy it. Their story was only beginning, but it was already a tale of defiance, courage, and hope. As we begin this journey into the lore of Steven Universe, let us pause for a moment and feel the weight of the world the crystal gems carry. It is a world where freedom is earned, where bonds are formed through shared dreams, and where the fight for what's right is never truly over. Rose quartz, a name that echoes through the ages, a name whispered among the stars, a name that holds both beauty and mystery. To many, she was a legend, an icon of hope, an emblem of defiance against a system that sought to control every aspect of existence. But to those who knew her, she was so much more. Rose quartz was not just a symbol, she was a living, breathing gem with a heart full of love and a soul brimming with compassion. Her legend is a tale of rebellion, of sacrifice, and of a fierce determination to create a world where freedom and love could flourish. The story of Rose Quartz begins long before the formation of the crystal gems. She was not always the leader of the rebellion, nor was she always the beloved figure that the world would come to know. Rose was born on Homeworld, just like every other gem, but unlike many others, she felt a deep unease with the rigid system that governed the lives of her people. From the moment she began to understand the world around her, Rose realized that something was missing. The gems of Homeworld were born with a singular purpose: to serve the diamonds, to carry out their will without question, to maintain the order of the universe as dictated by the diamond's supreme rule. But Rose could not accept this. She could not bear the thought of living a life without choice, without the freedom to choose her own path. She believed that every gem, every living being, deserved the right to determine their own destiny. Rose's heart was full of compassion for those who were born into a life of servitude, and it was this compassion that set her apart from the others. She could not stand by and watch as her fellow gems were forced to accept a fate that was not their own. And so, Rose did what many would not. She rebelled. She turned against the very system that had created her and began to fight for a better future, one where gems could be free to make their own choices, to live with purpose, and to love without restriction. Rose's rebellion was not born out of hatred or violence, but from a deep, unwavering belief in the power of love and freedom. She believed that a world where gems were free to be themselves, to form their own identities, was worth fighting for. It was this belief that led her to challenge the very foundation of the Diamond Authority. At first, Rose's rebellion was a quiet one. She did not raise her weapon against the diamonds in the beginning. Instead, she spoke to the gems who were dissatisfied with their roles, the ones who felt the same yearning for something more. It was from these gems that Rose formed the first crystal gems. They were not just a team of warriors, they were a family, bound together by a common cause and a shared vision of a better future. There was Garnet, a fusion of two gems whose love for one another transcended all boundaries. There was Pearl, a gem who had once served as a loyal servant to the diamonds, but who found a new sense of purpose in the rebellion. And then there was Amethyst, a free-spirited gem who had always felt out of place, but who found strength in the family they had created. Together, these gems formed the foundation of the Crystal Gems, a group that would come to represent everything that Rose believed in. They fought not for power, not for glory, but for something far more precious, the right to exist as they truly were. They fought for the freedom to love, to choose, to live without fear of oppression. And they fought for the Earth, a planet that had captured Rose's heart and soul. The Earth was a special place for Rose Quartz. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, a world teeming with life and beauty, a world where creatures of all shapes and sizes lived in harmony. Rose knew that Earth was the perfect place to create the future she envisioned. It was a place where gems could live freely, away from the rigid rules of Homeworld. It was a place where they could grow, learn, and discover what it meant to truly be alive. But this dream came with a heavy price. As the rebellion against the diamonds gained momentum, Rose knew that the path ahead would be filled with challenges. She would have to make difficult choices, and she would have to sacrifice more than she ever imagined. The struggle for freedom was never easy, and Rose knew that the cost of this fight could be the very thing she held most dear, her own life. Yet despite the looming uncertainty, Rose pressed forward. She knew that her mission was worth the sacrifice, that the future she was fighting for was worth the pain and the loss. In her heart, Rose believed that the gem race could be more than just tools of the diamonds. They could be creators, dreamers, lovers, and free beings. And she would stop at nothing to make that dream a reality. The story of Rose Quartz is a story of love. It is a love for freedom, for justice, for the earth, and for her fellow gems. It is a love that transcends all boundaries, a love that defies the laws of the universe and the expectations of society. Rose Quartz's legacy is one of compassion, of sacrifice, and of an unwavering belief in the power of love to change the world. As we reflect on the life of Rose Quartz, we are reminded of the power of choice and the importance of standing up for what we believe in. Rose's journey was not without hardship, but it was a journey filled with hope and the possibility of a brighter future. Her love for the world she sought to protect continues to resonate, and her story serves as a reminder that no matter the odds, love and freedom are always worth fighting for. In the vast, unyielding expanse of the universe lies the gem homeworld, a place that, to the untrained eye, might appear as nothing more than a cold, metallic sphere suspended in space. It is a world of rigid order, of stark beauty, but also one of constraint, where the gems are not free to follow their hearts, but are instead bound to serve the whims of the Diamond Authority. It is a world that exists far from the warmth and vibrancy of Earth, where color is scarce and emotion is a luxury few can afford. The gem homeworld is a place built upon the concept of hierarchy. At the top stand the diamonds: yellow diamond, blue diamond, white diamond, and once a pink diamond, whose rule was absolute. Their power is immense, their control unwavering. They govern the gems with an iron fist, dictating every aspect of their lives. From the moment a gem is formed, they are assigned a purpose, whether it be to serve as a soldier, a worker, or a servant. There is no room for deviation, no space for individuality. To be a gem on Homeworld is to be part of a greater system, one that values conformity over creativity, order over freedom. The Homeworld is a place where gems are created and molded to fit their roles, their identities shaped by the very core of their being. The gems are formed from the earth of their world, drawn from the deep, energy-rich mines that line the surface. Their bodies are crafted with precision, their gems embedded into their forms as a symbol of their purpose. It is a place where every gem has a predetermined role, where every move is calculated, and where every moment is spent in service to the diamonds. And yet, despite the cold, methodical nature of Homeworld, there is a beauty to its structure. The architecture is grand, a testament to the diamond's reign. Tall spires of crystal rise from the surface, their surfaces gleaming with a cold light, reflecting the harsh beauty of the world they inhabit. The sky above is a deep, starless black, its emptiness a reflection of the void that exists within the hearts of those who live beneath it. And yet, despite its harshness, there is something hypnotic about Homeworld, a sense of power and purpose that is almost intoxicating, drawing all those who live there into its unrelenting rhythm. It is within this world that the gems are born, each one crafted to serve the needs of the diamonds. Every gem has a specific function, a role that is dictated by their type, their gem, and their purpose. The warrior gems, like Jasper, are strong and powerful, bred for battle and combat. The pearls, like the one who served Rose Quartz, are created to serve, to be subservient and loyal to their masters. The amethysts, like the one who would later join the crystal gems, are designed for labor, for mining and manual work. Each gem has a place, and each place is defined by the system that rules them. But even in this world of conformity, there are cracks. There are moments of rebellion, moments when gems begin to question the very system that has shaped their lives. Rose quartz was one such gem. She was born on Homeworld, crafted from the same earth as all the others. She was assigned a role, as every gem is, but Rose was different. From the beginning, she felt the stirrings of something greater, something more powerful than the role she had been given. Rose's rebellion was not a spontaneous act, but the culmination of years of quiet reflection and growing discontent. She looked around her and saw gems who had been born for one purpose, to serve. She saw them trapped in lives that were not their own, bound by an invisible force that dictated their every move. She saw the harshness of the diamond's rule, the way they crushed any hope for individuality or freedom. And in the face of this, Rose chose to act. She chose to fight for something better, something more. The rebellion that Rose Quartz began was not one born of violence, at least not initially. It was a quiet movement, a movement of hearts and minds, of gems who wanted more from their lives than servitude. Rose did not take up arms right away. She spoke to the gems around her quietly, gently, urging them to see the world as it could be rather than as it was. She spoke of a world where gems could be free, where they could live as they chose, where they could create their own destinies. It was a vision that resonated with many gems, and soon Rose found herself surrounded by others who shared her dream. Garnet, a fusion of two gems who had learned the power of love and unity, joined her cause. Pearl, once a servant, now a leader in the rebellion, brought her strength and her unwavering loyalty to Rose. And Amethyst, a gem who had been created as an experiment, an outsider in her own right, found a place in the rebellion, discovering for the first time that she too had a voice. Together, these gems formed the Crystal Gems, a family bound not by the system that had created them, but by a shared desire for freedom and change. The Crystal Gems were not just warriors, they were symbols of hope, of possibility, of a future where gems could choose their own paths. And their fight was not just for themselves, but for all gems who had been oppressed by the rule of the diamonds. The gem homeworld may have been a place of power and control, but it was also a place of great loss. The diamonds ruled with fear, and they crushed any who dared to defy them. But Rose's rebellion was a spark in the darkness, a light that would lead the way to a new future. It was the beginning of a journey that would take Rose and her allies across the stars to the earth, where they would fight not only for the freedom of the gems, but for the future of all living beings. In the quiet shadows of history, there are figures whose actions shape the world long after they are gone. Rose Quartz is one of those figures, her legacy etched deeply into the fabric of the universe. To those who knew her, Rose was more than just a name. She was a symbol of hope, of courage, and of defiance against a system that sought to erase the very essence of individuality. But she was also a mother, a friend, and a warrior whose journey would leave an indelible mark on the hearts of those who followed her. Rose Quartz's rebellion was not born out of a desire for power or control, but from the belief that every gem deserved to be free. Her vision was one of peace and self-determination, where the gems could live without fear of the Diamond Authority's oppressive rule. She saw the beauty in every gem, no matter their creation or purpose, and she believed in their right to choose their own paths. This belief, this deep conviction in the power of freedom and love, guided her every action as she fought against the regime that had shaped her existence. But Rose's journey was not an easy one. She did not set out to become a leader of a rebellion, and she certainly did not seek the mantle of heroism that would come with it. Rose was born on Homeworld, just like every other gem, and she was created for a specific purpose. But from the moment she became aware of her surroundings, she knew something was wrong. The gem Homeworld was a place of rigid hierarchy where the diamonds ruled with absolute power, and every gem had a predetermined role to play. Rose was no different. She was born to serve, like all the others. But she couldn't ignore the stirring within her heart, the quiet voice that told her there was something more. As Rose grew older, she began to question everything she had been taught. She saw gems who were born to serve without question, their entire lives dictated by the diamond's desires. She saw gems who were forced into roles they did not choose, who lived in fear of the diamond's wrath if they failed to conform. Rose knew that she could not stand by and watch as her fellow gems suffered under this oppressive system. She had to do something, even if it meant defying everything she had ever known. And so, Rose began the rebellion, not with a bang, but with a whisper. She did not raise her weapon against the diamonds at first. Instead, she began to speak to the gems around her. She spoke of freedom, of choice, of a world where the gems could live on their own terms. She spoke of a world where love was not limited by the dictates of power, where the gems could be free to form their own identities and destinies. The crystal gems were born from this quiet rebellion. Rose's first allies were those who shared her vision of a better future. There was Garnet, a fusion of two gems who had learned to love beyond the boundaries of their creation. There was Amethyst, a gem whose playful spirit hid a deep sense of longing for something more. And there was Pearl, a gem who had once served the diamonds, but who found a new purpose in Rose's cause. Together, these gems formed the foundation of the crystal gems, a family bound not by duty, but by love, by choice, and by the belief that a better world was possible. The rebellion was not without its hardships. The diamonds, seeing their power threatened, sent their forces to quash the crystal gems. The battle for Earth was not just a physical one, but a battle for the very soul of the gems. Rose knew that the path she had chosen would be fraught with danger, but she also knew that the stakes were higher than just her own life. The future of the gems and the future of all living beings depended on the outcome of this rebellion. But Rose did not fight alone. She fought alongside her friends, her family, her fellow gems. The crystal gems became more than just a group of rebels. They became a symbol of resistance, of hope, and of the possibility of change. Through their struggles, they proved that even in the darkest of times, love and courage could light the way forward. It was on Earth that Rose found her true calling. Earth, with its rich diversity of life, its vibrant landscapes, and its infinite possibilities, became the sanctuary where Rose could build the world she had always dreamed of. It was here that the crystal gems made their stand, vowing to protect the planet from the diamonds and anyone who sought to harm it. They fought for the Earth, but they also fought for the gems who had been oppressed by the diamond's rule. They fought for the right to choose, for the right to love, for the right to live. But in the end, Rose's story was also one of sacrifice. The very rebellion she led, the very dream she fought for, would come at a great cost. Rose knew that the path she had chosen would require her to give up everything she held dear, even her own life. And yet she pressed on, knowing that the future she envisioned was worth every sacrifice. She was willing to risk everything for the chance to create a world where love and freedom could flourish. And so, Rose Quartz's story is one of love, of sacrifice, and of the power of choice. It is a story that resonates with all who believe in the possibility of a better world, a world where every being is free to be who they truly are. Her legacy lives on in the hearts of the crystal gems, in the stories they tell, and in the future they continue to build together. As we reflect on Rose's journey, we are reminded of the importance of standing up for what we believe in, of fighting for the freedom and love that are our birthrights. Rose's story is not just the story of a rebellion, it is the story of a mother, a friend, and a leader who gave everything to protect the world she loved. Her legacy is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of love can guide us home. High above the swirling chaos of the universe, where the stars seem to fade into an endless expanse of space, the diamonds rule with unmatched authority. Their reign is one of order, but it is also one of control, a control that spans across countless worlds, including the gem homeworld. Each of the diamonds embodies a different aspect of governance, and together they create a system that is as unyielding as it is vast. Yellow Diamond, the most pragmatic of the three, is a figure of efficiency and power. Her rule is defined by strict discipline, a devotion to maintaining the established order. She sees the gems as tools, each one created to fulfill a specific purpose, and she believes that their purpose should never be questioned. Her vision is one of unwavering stability, where every gem knows their role and performs it without hesitation. Yellow Diamond's rule is one of precision, where the tiniest error is seen as a flaw, and where deviation from the norm is not tolerated. Blue Diamond, on the other hand, is a figure of sorrow and melancholy. Her authority is marked by a deep sense of loss, a yearning for something that cannot be reclaimed. Blue Diamond rules with compassion, but it is a compassion that is clouded by grief. She has seen the destruction of her own creations, the breaking of her perfect order, and her heart mourns for the things that are lost. She longs for peace, but her sorrow often stands in the way of achieving it. Her rule is softer than Yellow Diamond's, but it is no less absolute. Beneath her sadness lies a strict adherence to the idea that the universe must be governed by the diamonds, and that the gems must serve them, no matter the cost. And then there is White Diamond, the most enigmatic and powerful of them all. Her rule is one of complete dominance, a vision of perfection that brooks no imperfection. White Diamond believes that the universe can only thrive if every gem is in perfect harmony, if every being is aligned with her ideals. Her vision is one of complete unity, where all gems are united in purpose and function, their individual traits erased to create a flawless whole. White Diamond's rule is absolute, and she sees any deviation from her vision as a flaw that must be eradicated. To her, the destruction of individuality is not a loss, but a necessity for the greater good of the universe. Together, the diamonds represent the pillars of the gem homeworld's governance. They are the heart of the system, the driving force behind the structure that has shaped the lives of countless gems. Under their rule, there is no room for disobedience, no space for creativity, no allowance for individual will. The gems are born to serve, and to question the diamonds is to question the very foundation of the universe itself. The diamond's rule is enforced through their vast army of gems, each one created to fulfill a specific role in the greater system. These gems are created in a factory like manner, born from the earth of the gem homeworld, and shaped into the forms that best suit their purposes. Each gem is crafted with care, but with a singular goal in mind: to serve the diamond's will. There are warrior gems like jasper, who are bred for battle and combat. There are pearls, like the one who once served rose quartz, whose purpose is to serve as servants and attendants to their masters. There are amethysts, like the one who would later join the crystal gems, who are created for labor, to mine and toil in the depths of the gem homeworld's caverns. It is a world where individuality is not just discouraged, it is erased. The gems are created to fit their roles, and their roles are all that they are. There is no room for deviation, no room for personal desires, no space for dreams. The diamonds have crafted a world where everything is predetermined and the very essence of a gem's existence is dictated by their function. Yet even within this cold, unyielding system, there are cracks. The diamond's rule may be absolute, but it is not without its challenges. There are gems who question the system, who wonder if there could be more than just the roles they were created for. There are those who dream of a world where they can be free, where they can live without fear of punishment or retribution. Rose quartz was one such gem, and it was her rebellion that would challenge the diamond's rule like nothing before. The diamonds ruled with an iron fist, but their reign was not without its flaws. They may have created a system of order and control, but they also created a system that stifled creativity, that crushed the spirit of individuality. The gems were not allowed to live their lives freely. They were not allowed to choose their paths. They were born to serve, and to serve only. The diamond's rule was one of perfection, but it was a perfection built on the suppression of individuality, on the suppression of the very essence of what it meant to be a gem. Rose quartz, with her dream of a world where gems could be free to choose their own paths, was the embodiment of everything the diamonds feared. She was a symbol of rebellion, of defiance against the order they had created. Rose's very existence threatened the diamond's vision of perfection, and that is why they sought to destroy her. They could not tolerate a gem who questioned their authority, who fought for a future where the gems could be more than just tools to be used and discarded. But Rose's rebellion was more than just a fight against the diamond's rule. It was a fight for the soul of the gems themselves, a fight for the right to live as they truly were, without fear of retribution. It was a fight for the freedom to choose, to love, to be. And it was a fight that would take Rose and the crystal gems far from the gem homeworld to Earth, where they would forge a new future, one where the gems could finally be free from the oppressive rule of the diamonds. Long before Earth became a sanctuary for the crystal gems, it was nothing more than an unassuming planet, nestled among the stars. But to the gems, Earth held a special place in the universe. It was a world that represented not only the potential for life, but the potential for change, for transformation, and for the beginning of something new. For the gems, Earth became more than just a planet. It became the heart of their rebellion, the place where they would fight for freedom, love, and self determination. Earth, with its sprawling forests, its vast oceans, and its expansive skies, was a stark contrast to the cold, mechanical world of the Gem homeworld. While the Gem homeworld was a place of rigid structure and control, Earth was a place of boundless possibility, a place where life bloomed in every corner and where the very essence of existence was celebrated in all its messy, beautiful forms. It was on Earth that the crystal gems would come to understand what it meant to be truly free, to live in harmony with nature, and to forge connections that were not bound by the strict dictates of the diamonds. But Earth's role in gem history was not always one of peace and tranquility. Long before the arrival of Rose Quartz and her rebellion, the gems had come to Earth with a very different purpose. The gem homeworld had set its sights on Earth centuries before, seeing it as a valuable resource. The gems had already begun to mine the planet, extracting its precious materials for their own use. The Earth was rich in resources, and to the gems, it seemed like the perfect place to harvest what they needed to fuel their civilization. However, Earth's true significance was not just in its physical resources, but in its potential to nurture life. The planet it had a vitality that was unique, something that no other world possessed. The gems could feel it as they arrived, a quiet hum in the air, a pulse that beckoned them to stop, to listen, to understand. Earth was alive in a way that no other planet in the universe had been, and it was this life force that would eventually captivate the crystal gems and shape their mission. Rose Quartz, more than anyone, understood the significance of Earth. To her, the planet was not just a place to be mined or controlled. It was a living, breathing entity, full of beauty and wonder. It was a world that had the power to transform, to heal, to change the very fabric of existence. Rose saw in Earth the same potential that she saw in the gems, an opportunity to create something new, something that could defy the oppressive control of the diamonds and offer the gems the freedom they had been denied. When Rose and the crystal gems began their rebellion, Earth became the central battleground. It was here that they would make their stand, a stand that would change the course of history for the gems and for all who called Earth home. The planet itself became a symbol of resistance, of the fight for self-determination and the right to live freely. It was on Earth that Rose and her allies would build a new world, a world where the gems could be who they truly were, without the weight of the diamond's control hanging over them. For the gems, Earth was a place of healing. It was a place where they could learn to be more than just warriors or servants. It was a place where they could explore their own identities, form relationships, and create bonds that transcended their roles. On Homeworld, Earth gave them the freedom to dream, to love, and to grow in ways they never could have on the Gem Homeworld. It was here that they began to understand what it meant to be alive, to truly exist in the world in a way that was full of meaning and purpose. But Earth's role in gem history was also one of sacrifice. The crystal gems knew that in order to protect Earth, they would have to fight against the forces of the Diamond Authority. They knew that the diamonds would never allow the gems to be free, that they would stop at nothing to reclaim the planet and its resources. The fight for Earth was not just a battle for the planet itself, but a battle for the soul of the gems. It was a fight for their right to exist, to choose their own destinies, and to live in harmony with the world they had come to love. Rose quartz and the crystal gems fought for Earth with everything they had, not just to protect the planet, but to protect the life that flourished within it. They understood that Earth was more than just a resource, it was a symbol of what could be. Earth represented the possibility of a future where the gems could live in peace, where they could create their own identities and forge their own paths. It was a future that Rose dreamed of, a future where the gems could live as they were meant to, not as tools or servants, but as beings with the right to choose their own destinies. And yet, despite their best efforts, the battle for Earth was not without its hardships. The Diamonds, seeing their control slipping away, sent their forces to reclaim the planet, to crush the rebellion that Rose had begun. The fight for Earth was a struggle that would cost the crystal gems more than they ever anticipated. They faced countless challenges, from the Diamond Authority's relentless attacks to their own internal struggles. But through it all, they stood firm, their love for Earth and for each other giving them the strength to continue. In the end, Earth became not just a battleground, but a sanctuary. It was the place where the crystal gems would find their purpose, where they would learn what it meant to be truly free. And it was here that they would make their stand, their legacy etched into the very soil of the planet they had sworn to protect. Earth became their home, the place where they could build the future they had always dreamed of, a future where love, freedom, and individuality would thrive. The story of the crystal gems is one of unity, of love, and of the quiet strength that comes from shared purpose. It is a story that begins with the seeds of rebellion, but it is also a story of family, of bonds forged through hardship and triumph. The formation of the crystal gems was not a simple matter of rallying against the diamonds. It was the beginning of something much more profound, an alliance of gems who chose to fight not just for survival, but for a new future, one where they could define themselves on their own terms. Rose, quartz, the heart and soul of the rebellion, understood from the very beginning that this fight could not be won alone. She knew that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, with obstacles that would test not just their strength, but their spirit. If the crystal gems were to stand a chance against the overwhelming power of the Diamond Authority, they would need to come together, not as soldiers or servants, but as equals, as a family. It was this understanding that led Rose to form the first true bond of the crystal gems, a bond that would define them for years to come. The first gem to join Rose was garnet, a fusion of two gems, ruby and sapphire. Garnet was unlike any gem Rose had ever met. She was strong, but not just in body. Garnet was a symbol of unity, of love, and of balance. Ruby and sapphire had learned to work together to create a harmony that transcended their individual strengths and weaknesses. Garnet, as their fusion, embodied this perfect union, a union that was as powerful as it was beautiful. For Rose, garnet represented everything that was possible when gems came together, when they set aside their differences and worked toward a common goal. It was Garnet who would later become the leader of the crystal gems, guiding them with wisdom, strength, and unwavering love. Next came Amethyst. Born in the wilds of the gem homeworld, Amethyst had been created in a manner that was unorthodox, her existence a product of the diamond's desire for mass production rather than individuality. Amethyst was born to be a worker, a laborer, a tool for the gem system. But Amethyst was different. She was wild, free spirited, and untamed. She had never fit into the neat, orderly world of the gems on Homeworld. Instead, she had learned to embrace the freedom of living without constraints. Amethyst's personality was as vibrant and unpredictable as her purple gemstone, and she was as much of a force of nature as the planet she had come to love. For Rose, Amethyst represented the joy of freedom, the wildness that came with being true to oneself. Lastly, there was Pearl. Pearl had once been a servant to Rose's greatest enemy, the Diamond Authority. She had been created to serve the whims of the diamonds, to be their attendant, their helper, and their guide. But Pearl was more than just a servant. She was a gem with a deep sense of duty, a gem who had learned the value of loyalty and love. When Rose first met Pearl, she saw someone who had been broken, someone who had been shaped by the cold, impersonal hands of the diamonds, but who had the potential for so much more. Pearl had spent her existence under the oppressive rule of the diamonds, but Rose saw in her the possibility of something better. She saw in Pearl a fellow soul, one who could learn to embrace her true self and stand beside her as an equal. Together, these four gems formed the core of the crystal gems. They were not just warriors fighting for a cause, they were a family, bound together by their love for one another, their shared dreams, and their belief in a better future. Their strength came not from their individual abilities, but from their ability to come together, to support one another, and to fight as one. The crystal gems were a symbol of unity, a reminder that when gems came together in love and friendship, they were capable of achieving anything. But the formation of the crystal gems was not without its challenges. The diamonds, seeing the threat posed by this new alliance, would not allow the gems to live in peace. They sent their forces to Earth, determined to crush the rebellion before it could gain any more strength. The first battle was not an easy one, and the crystal gems were forced to fight for their survival. Yet in the face of overwhelming odds, the crystal gems stood firm. They fought not for power, not for glory, but for the chance to live freely, to create a world where they could be who they truly were. Through every battle, every struggle, the bond between the crystal gems grew stronger. They learned to trust one another, to rely on one another, and to embrace the differences that made them unique. Garnet's wisdom, Amethyst's wild spirit, Pearl's loyalty, and Rose's unwavering love for all of them, these qualities would come together to form a family unlike any other. Together, they would protect Earth, protect the planet that had given them the freedom they had longed for, and protect the future that they had dreamed of. The formation of the crystal gems marked the beginning of a new chapter in gem history. It was a chapter defined by love, by freedom, and by the belief that every gem deserved the right to live as they chose. It was a chapter that would change the course of history, one battle at a time, and it was a chapter that would shape the future of not just the crystal gems, but of all gems who longed for the same freedom and peace. Steven Universe was born under the most extraordinary of circumstances. His very existence was both a continuation and a culmination of a tale that had started long before his birth. He was a child of two worlds, one of light and power, the other of warmth and vulnerability. As the son of Rose Quartz, the leader of the Crystal Gems, and Greg DeMeo, a human who loved her with all his heart, Stephen represented both the legacy of his mother and the hope of something new, a being who was both gem and human, with the potential to bridge the two worlds. From the moment Stephen came into the world, he was different. He was born with a gem embedded in his navel, a sign of his heritage and his connection to the crystal gems. But unlike the other gems, who were formed from the earth of the gem homeworld, Stephen's gem was a part of him in a way that was entirely unique. It wasn't just a symbol of his gem side, it was the very heart of who he was, a reminder of the legacy that he carried with him from his mother. Rose quartz, the gem who had fought for the freedom of the crystal gems and for the protection of Earth, had given up her physical form to bring Stephen into the world. Her sacrifice was a powerful one, and it left a deep mark on those who loved her, especially the crystal gems who had fought by her side. Rose's departure left a void, and it was Stephen who would eventually fill it. But while Stephen was Rose's son, he was also something else, a symbol of hope for the future, for what was possible when the barriers between gem and human could be blurred. As a child, Stephen struggled to understand his place in the world. He was not just a gem, not just a human, he was both, and this duality often left him feeling confused. The gems had come to care for Stephen, but their relationship with him was complicated. They had known Rose, and in many ways, Stephen was a living reminder of her. For them, Stephen was both a precious heir to her legacy and an individual with his own path to carve. They loved him, but they also understood that his journey was going to be very different from Rose's. Stephen's mother, Rose Quartz, had been a fierce and passionate leader, but she had also been a dreamer. She had believed in the possibility of a world where the gems could live freely, and she had dedicated her life to making that world a reality. Her legacy was one of sacrifice, love, and unyielding commitment to the cause of freedom. But while Rose's story had been one of rebellion, Stephen's journey was always destined to be something different, a journey of self-discovery and acceptance. Growing up, Stephen was surrounded by the crystal gems, and they became his family. Garnet, amethyst, and pearl each played their own role in Stephen's life, guiding him, supporting him, and teaching him the lessons they had learned from Rose. But Stephen was more than just a student. He was also a beacon of hope, the one who could unite the worlds of gems and humans. It was Stephen's unique position as both a human and a gem that made him the perfect bridge between these two disparate worlds. But Stephen's heritage was not just a matter of lineage, it was also a matter of power. As the son of Rose Quartz, Stephen inherited a special connection to the gem magic that ran through his veins. While the other gems had their own unique abilities, Stephen's power was unlike theirs. His gem, a piece of his mother's own essence, was the source of his power, but it was also a key to understanding who he was. Stephen's abilities were always changing, growing, and evolving as he matured, and it was this unpredictable nature of his powers that often made him feel out of place. Stephen's heritage was also tied to the legacy of the crystal gems themselves. The gems had fought for freedom, for a world where they could live as they chose. But while they had achieved a certain level of success in their rebellion, there was still so much work to be done. Stephen, as the son of Rose Quartz, felt the weight of that unfinished work. He knew that he had inherited not just the power of his mother, but the responsibility to continue her mission, to protect the earth, to protect the gems, and to ensure that the world she had dreamed of could become a reality. Despite the challenges he faced, Stephen never gave up on this mission. He spent his childhood learning from the crystal gems, but he also spent his time discovering who he was and what he wanted to become. He realized that he was not defined solely by his heritage. While his mother's legacy shaped him, he was his own person with his own dreams and his own strengths. As Stephen grew, he began to understand that being both gem and human was not a burden, it was a gift. He had the ability to see the world from both perspectives, to understand both sides of the conflict that had shaped his life. Stephen's journey was not just one of external battles, it was a journey of internal growth. He had to learn to accept himself, to understand his power, and to realize that he could not live in the shadow of his mother forever. He had to create his own path, one that was true to himself and to the values that Rose Quartz had instilled in him. It was a path that would take him beyond the legacy of the crystal gems and into a future where the gem and human worlds could coexist in harmony. And while Stephen's heritage was rooted in the past, his future was one that he had yet to fully understand. He was the son of Rose Quartz, but he was also his own person. And it was this balance between the past and the future, between his heritage and his own identity, that would define his journey. The early days of Stephen's journey with the crystal gems were filled with wonder, confusion, and quiet revelations. As a child of both gem and human heritage, Stephen's path was one of discovery, and the crystal gems, garnet, amethyst, and pearl, were there to guide him every step of the way. They had been Rose Quartz's allies, her family in the truest sense of the word, but now they were also Stephen's family, even though they had their own struggles and their own complicated relationships with the past. At first, Stephen could not fully understand the weight of the legacy he had inherited. To him, the crystal gems were simply the closest thing to a family he had ever known. Garnet, the stoic and steadfast leader, was the first gem to show Stephen the true strength of unity, as she balanced the individual needs of Ruby and Sapphire to create a harmony that allowed her to protect the group. To Stephen, Garnet was an embodiment of the love that could exist between gems, but also the discipline needed to hold them all together as a team. Through her, Stephen learned that love, especially the deep and unconditional love shared between the crystal gems, was not always simple. It was something that required constant understanding, patience, and compromise. Amethyst was another constant figure in Stephen's life, full of playfulness and freedom, but also a quiet sense of longing. She had always been the most carefree of the crystal gems, her spirit untethered by the rigid roles that the gem society had imposed upon her. As a fellow wild card, Amethyst quickly became Stephen's closest companion, teaching him that it was okay to embrace his flaws, to laugh at himself, and to not take everything so seriously. She was the gem who could make him smile when things felt too heavy, but she also showed him that there was pain in the past. Amethyst had not been created to be a perfect gem, and her struggles with self-worth mirrored those of many gems who had been shaped by the Diamond Authority. Through Amethyst, Stephen learned that imperfections were a part of who they were, and that it was possible to find beauty in them. Then there was Pearl. To Stephen, Pearl was a constant reminder of his mother, and though he loved her deeply, Their relationship was always fraught with complexity. Pearl had been Rose Quartz's most loyal and devoted follower, and after Rose's passing, Pearl often looked to Stephen as a way of keeping that connection alive. For Pearl, the early days with Stephen were filled with deep care, but also unspoken grief. Stephen felt the pressure of being the child of Rose, but he did not fully understand why Pearl held him to such high expectations. In the early days, Stephen would often find himself caught between the love and care that Pearl offered him and the need to honor his own identity, apart from the memory of his mother. At first, it seemed that Pearl's love for Stephen came with the desire for him to be Rose. She had great expectations for him to live up to his mother's legacy, but the burden that Stephen carried was not one that could be easily passed from mother to son. He was his own person, someone who would one day carve out his own path, and the balance between respecting the legacy of Rose Quartz and finding his own way was something that Stephen struggled to understand in those early days. Pearl, too, struggled to let go of the image of Rose that she had held so tightly in her heart, and at times it felt as if Pearl's love for Stephen was tinged with that same sorrow that had defined so much of her past. Yet, despite the complexity of their relationships, the crystal gems were a family, bound together not just by their past battles and shared victories, but by the quieter moments of everyday life. They weren't just a team of warriors or rebels, they were beings who had chosen to love each other, even when it wasn't always easy. They supported one another, they cared for one another, and they fought for the future of the earth they had come to cherish. And it was in this shared love that Stephen began to find his place, learning the value of loyalty, the importance of community, and the quiet strength that comes from the bonds of family. The early days with the crystal gems were not without challenges. Stephen was still learning to harness the powers that he had inherited from his mother, and often those powers seemed unpredictable. One moment, Stephen could summon a shield, a manifestation of his gem's power, and the next, he would struggle to control it. His abilities were as much a part of him as his heart, yet they felt foreign, something that he couldn't fully grasp. This constant uncertainty was a source of frustration for Stephen, as he longed to understand his role within the crystal gems and what his place in the world truly was. At times, the crystal gems would go on missions to protect the earth, to fight against the forces that sought to harm it, and Stephen would accompany them, eager to prove himself. He would fight alongside them, even though he was still learning what it meant to be a crystal gem. It was in these moments that Stephen began to understand the depth of the sacrifices his mother had made and the weight of the responsibility that came with the title of Crystal Gem. Each mission, each encounter with the forces that threatened their world, deepened his understanding of who he was becoming and what it meant to carry the legacy of Rose Quartz. Through all of these experiences, Stephen began to understand that his journey was not just about being a gem or a human, but about finding balance. He was learning to accept both sides of his identity, the beauty of his gem powers and the humanity that grounded him. The crystal gems, in their own way, helped Stephen navigate this duality, teaching him that neither side of him was more important than the other. They showed him that it was possible to be both gem and human, both the child of Rose Quartz and the individual Stephen universe. And as the days passed, As Stephen grew stronger, more confident, and more attuned to his powers, he began to understand that his path was not just shaped by the past, it was a path that he was creating for himself. The love of the crystal gems, the wisdom of garnet, the carefree spirit of amethyst, and the guidance of pearl were all pieces of the puzzle that Stephen was slowly putting together. With each passing day, Stephen began to step into his role not just as the son of rose quartz, but as his own person, a young gem and human who would one day lead the world to a new future. The powers of the crystal gems are as diverse and unique as the gems themselves, each one a manifestation of the deep, ancient energies that flow through the universe. The abilities they wield are not just tools of combat, but symbols of their very essence, of who they are and what they stand for. For Stephen, understanding these powers was a journey of self discovery as he began to grasp the true depth of his gem heritage and how it connected to his identity as both a human and a gem. Each of the crystal gems possessed abilities that were uniquely tied to their respective gemstones. Garnet, as the fusion of ruby and sapphire, had the power of precognition. She could see into the future, sensing the possible outcomes of any situation, and this ability became one of the most vital tools in their arsenal. But Garnet's power wasn't just about seeing the future, it was about the strength to act in the present. She understood that while the future was uncertain, the choices made today would shape the path ahead. Garnet's power to foresee possible outcomes allowed her to protect the crystal gems from danger, to guide them through moments of uncertainty, and to provide the wisdom needed when their mission seemed impossible. Amethyst's power, on the other hand, was a reflection of her wild, untamed nature. As a gem created for physical labor, Amethyst's abilities were raw, instinctual, and full of energy. She had the power of shapeshifting, allowing her to transform her form into various shapes and sizes, giving her an advantage in both battle and everyday life. Her abilities were as fluid and unpredictable as her personality. Amethyst was a free spirit, and her powers reflected her lack of constraint, her ability to move beyond the limits imposed by the gem society. For Stephen, Amethyst's power was a lesson in embracing change, in understanding that flexibility and adaptation were strengths in their own right. Then there was Pearl. Pearl's abilities were focused on precision, agility, and strategic thinking. She had the power of light manipulation, using her gem to project beams of light and energy. Pearl's power also allowed her to create holograms, often using these projections to strategize in battle or to communicate ideas that required more than words. But Pearl's power wasn't just about her abilities, it was about her unwavering commitment to her ideals. She believed in perfection, in the ideal, and her powers reflected this desire for structure and order. Pearl was not just a warrior, she was a teacher, a guide, and someone who sought to make the world a better place through discipline and care. For Stephen, understanding these powers was not just about learning what each gem could do, it was about learning who they were and how their abilities reflected their personalities. Each gem's power was a mirror of their inner world, their hopes, and their struggles. Stephen's journey into understanding his own power was intertwined with his understanding of the crystal gems. It was through them that Stephen began to understand that the true nature of power was not about strength alone. It was about what you chose to do with it and how you used that power to shape the world around you. As Stephen began to grow into his role as a member of the Crystal Gems, he started to realize that his powers were different from those of the others. His gemstone, inherited from his mother, was a part of him in a way that the other gems' powers were not. Stephen's abilities were unique to him, a fusion of the powers of rose quartz and the humanity that flowed through his veins. He could summon his shield, a powerful and defensive tool that was a reflection of both his gem and his heart. The shield was Stephen's first true manifestation of his power, a symbol of his desire to protect others and to fight for what was right. But as Stephen's powers grew, so did his understanding of the deeper, more mysterious aspects of his gem. He could summon his shield, yes, but there were other abilities that Stephen had yet to understand. As he spent more time with the crystal gems, he began to notice that his powers were more than just physical, they were emotional, tied to his feelings and the way he saw the world. His connection to the crystal gems, to Earth, and to the people he loved all shaped his powers in ways that were not immediately apparent. It was as if Stephen's ability to connect with others, to love and be loved, was the key to unlocking his full potential. One of the most powerful aspects of Stephen's powers was his ability to heal. Rose Quartz, his mother, had been known for her healing abilities, and Stephen inherited this gift. His ability to heal wasn't just a physical act, it was an act of empathy. When Stephen healed someone, he wasn't just mending their wounds, he was connecting with them on an emotional level, understanding their pain and helping them to overcome it. For Stephen, healing was more than a power. It was a way to bridge the gap between people, to mend the emotional scars that lingered beneath the surface. But Stephen's powers were not without their challenges. As a child of both gem and human heritage, Stephen's abilities were often unpredictable, and there were moments when he felt out of control. Unlike the other gems, who had mastered their powers over centuries, Stephen's powers were still evolving, and this constant flux made him feel uncertain at times. He would struggle to summon his shield when it was most needed, and he would often feel the weight of his heritage bearing down on him, as if he was being asked to live up to the legacy of his mother while forging his own path. And yet, it was in these moments of uncertainty that Stephen's true strength emerged. He learned that his power wasn't just about control, it was about trust. Trusting in the crystal gems, trusting in his own abilities, and trusting in the love that surrounded him. His powers were not just tools to be wielded, they were expressions of his connection to others, to the world, and to himself. Stephen's journey wasn't just about learning to use his abilities, it was about learning who he was and how he could use his powers to bring healing, understanding, and peace to the world. Through his connection to the crystal gems, Stephen began to understand that his powers were not defined by his gem alone. They were a reflection of the love and unity he shared with the people around him, a love that could transcend the boundaries of gem and human. And it was this love, this bond, that would guide Stephen as he continued his journey and faced the challenges that lay ahead. Fusions are one of the most beautiful and profound aspects of the Steven Universe world. They represent the union of two gems, not only combining their powers, but also their emotions, personalities, and experiences. Fusions are not just about strength, they are a deep expression of love, trust, and harmony between the gems who come together. In the early days of his journey, Stephen learned that fusions could be both a source of immense power and a symbol of connection, a connection that transcended individual identities and created something new, something greater than the sum of its parts. For the crystal gems, fusion was not just a technique, it was a way of life. It was a way of communicating without words, of expressing the deepest bonds that held them together. Through fusion, gems were able to experience each other's perspectives, to understand one another in ways that went beyond the physical. When gems fused, they became more than just individuals. They became a new entity, a new being with its own personality, abilities, and experiences. It was an experience that could be both exhilarating and overwhelming, as the fusion represented not just power, but the ultimate trust between two gems. The most iconic fusion in the story of Steven Universe is Garnet, the fusion of ruby and sapphire. Garnet is a symbol of the deep love and unity that exists between these two gems, a love that transcends the boundaries of individual identity. Ruby and sapphire are two very different gems. Ruby is impulsive, fiery, and passionate, while sapphire is calm, thoughtful, and driven by logic. Despite their differences, Ruby and Sapphire found a way to come together and form Garnet, a fusion that is a perfect harmony of both their strengths. Garnet's very existence proves that two beings, when they come together with love and respect, can become something greater than they ever could have been on their own. Garnet, as the leader of the Crystal Gems, is not just a powerful fighter, she is a symbol of the possibilities that fusion represents. Her fusion is a perfect balance between the two gems that form her, and it allows her to be both strong and compassionate, wise and gentle. Through Garnet, Stephen learns the power of love, not just as an emotion, but as the foundation of true strength. Garnet's relationship with Ruby and Sapphire teaches Stephen that fusion is not just about combining powers. It's about coming together to create something that is bigger than what each individual can accomplish alone. It's about harmony, understanding, and the strength that comes from deep emotional connection. Amethyst and Stephen also experience the power of fusion. Stephen, being part human, was initially unsure about how fusion would work for him, but as he spent more time with the crystal gems, he came to understand that fusion is not just a technique. It is a reflection of the relationships we form, the ways in which we connect with others. When Stephen fused with Amethyst, it was not only a test of his abilities, but a step toward understanding himself and his bond with the crystal gems. The fusion between Stephen and Amethyst was wild and unpredictable, just like Amethyst herself, but it was also an expression of their friendship and mutual care for one another. It demonstrated that even in the most unexpected combinations, fusion could bring out strengths that were not always obvious at first glance. For Stephen, fusing with Amethyst was an eye-opening experience. It was a moment of realization that fusion wasn't just about being more powerful. It was about feeling what the other gems felt, understanding their experiences, and finding common ground. Fusion allowed Stephen to see the world through Amethyst's eyes, to feel the energy and joy she brought to their group. It was a reminder that while fusion can be a tool of immense power, it is also a way of strengthening relationships, of deepening bonds, and of coming together in ways that go beyond the surface. Another important fusion that Stephen witnessed was that of pearl and amethyst. While these two gems had always been close, their differences were often at odds with one another. Pearl, with her disciplined and perfectionist nature, and amethyst, with her carefree and impulsive spirit, often found themselves in conflict. But through fusion, they were able to experience each other in a completely new way. When pearl and amethyst fused, they formed the fusion known as Sugilite, a being that was strong, wild, and full of power, but also a little unruly. Sugilite was a reminder that fusion, while powerful, could also bring out the aspects of a relationship that were challenging. It was through this fusion that Stephen realized that even in moments of tension and disagreement, fusion could provide new perspectives and new ways of working through conflicts. Sugilite's form was larger and more aggressive than the typical fusions that Stephen had witnessed, and it was a powerful manifestation of both Pearl's hidden frustrations and Amethyst's desire for freedom. But through the experience of fusing, Stephen learned that even the most difficult relationships could be reconciled, and that fusion was not about erasing differences, but about finding a way to work through them. Sugilite's existence showed Stephen that relationships are complex and multifaceted, and that strength can come from acknowledging and embracing these complexities. The very nature of fusion in the Steven Universe world is symbolic of the emotional connections that bind people together. Fusion is not just about power, it's about trust, love, and understanding. Each fusion that Stephen witnessed and participated in was a lesson in connection. It taught him that relationships are not always easy, that they require compromise and acceptance, but that when gems come together with love and respect, they can create something far more powerful than they could ever achieve on their own. For Stephen, fusion became not just a tool of combat, but a way of understanding and connecting with those around him. It was a way of learning how to navigate the complex emotions that came with being both a gem and a human, and how to bring the best parts of himself into harmony with the world around him. Through fusion, Stephen learned that love is not just about the people we choose to be close to. It's about the relationships we form, the bonds we create, and the ways in which we come together to become something greater than ourselves. The mystery of Pink Diamond is one of the central enigmas that permeates the story of Steven Universe, one that ties together the past of the Gem homeworld, the rebellion, and Steven's own identity. Pink Diamond, once thought to be a simple and somewhat naive ruler of a distant colony, is revealed to be far more complex than anyone could have imagined. Her story is one of secrets, betrayal, and a longing for something more than the rigid structure imposed by the diamonds. At first, Pink Diamond was considered the youngest and most sheltered of the diamonds. She was the youngest member of the Diamond Authority, the ruling class of the Gem homeworld, and she seemed to have little influence over the grand designs of her older sisters, Yellow, Blue, and White Diamond. Pink Diamond's role was largely ceremonial, overseeing the development of new colonies and territories, but her presence was largely overlooked. She seemed to be a figurehead, one whose power was defined more by her position than by any real authority. But as the story of Steven Universe unfolds, it becomes clear that Pink Diamond was more than just a naive ruler. She was a figure of great significance, not only to the Gem homeworld, but also to the rebellion that rose quartz would one day lead. The more Stephen and the crystal gems uncovered about Pink Diamond's true nature, the more they realized that her story was intricately tied to the origins of the crystal gems and the motivations behind Rose Quartz's decision to rebel. The first clue that something was amiss with Pink Diamond's past came when Stephen and the gems discovered the truth about her involvement with Earth. It was here, on this small and seemingly insignificant planet, that Pink Diamond had made a decision that would alter the course of gem history. Pink Diamond was the one who had originally sent the gems to Earth, ordering the creation of a colony and the extraction of the planet's resources. But over time, something changed within her. Pink Diamond became captivated by Earth, its beauty, its life, and the potential for a new way of living. Pink Diamond's transformation was subtle at first, but it was clear that she began to feel a deep connection to the Earth she had once seen as nothing more than a resource. She became increasingly disillusioned with the gem homeworld's rigid hierarchy, and she began to question the very system that had defined her existence. Pink Diamond's role as a ruler had always been constrained by the authority of her older sisters, but it was on Earth that she realized she could make her own choices, shape her own destiny. It was on Earth that she found the freedom she had longed for, a freedom that no other gem could offer her. Pink Diamond's growing affection for Earth was a turning point in her life, one that would ultimately lead to the formation of the crystal gems and the rebellion against the diamonds. Pink Diamond's decision to break away from the homeworld was not an easy one. It meant defying the very system that had created her, a system that placed the diamonds at the top of the hierarchy and demanded obedience from all gems. It meant turning her back on her family, her role, and everything she had been taught. But Pink Diamond's desire for freedom was too strong to ignore. It was this desire that led her to meet Rose Quartz, the leader of the rebellion, and to form the Crystal Gems. Pink Diamond's defection from the homeworld and her decision to protect Earth would forever alter the balance of power in the universe. Rose Quartz, with her vision of a world where gems could live freely, saw in Pink Diamond an ally, someone who understood the importance of choice, of individuality, and of love. But Pink Diamond's role in the rebellion was shrouded in secrecy. For many years, it was believed that Rose Quartz had shattered Pink Diamond, ending her life and causing her to disappear. This was the official story told by the Diamonds, a story that cast Rose as a villain and portrayed Pink Diamond as a martyr. But as Stephen and the Crystal Gems dug deeper into the mystery, they began to uncover the truth that Pink Diamond had not been shattered by Rose, but had faked her own death in order to escape the oppressive system of the Diamonds and live a life that was truly her own. The revelation that Pink Diamond had faked her own death was a shocking one, as it overturned everything that Stephen and the Gems had believed about the past. It meant that Rose Quartz's rebellion and the very foundation of the Crystal Gems had been built on a lie. But it also revealed the true depth of Pink Diamond's struggle. She had not simply abandoned her position to live on Earth. She had made a conscious decision to deceive the Diamonds and create a new identity for herself. In doing so, she had paved the way for the Crystal Gems to rise up and fight for the freedom of all gems. Pink Diamond's story was not one of simple defection or betrayal. It was a story of transformation, of a gem who had realized that the world she had been born into was not the world she wanted to live in. She had chosen to break away from the diamonds, not just to save herself, but to create a future where all gems could be free. Pink Diamond's sacrifice, her willingness to abandon everything she had known, was a powerful act of rebellion in its own right, and it was through her actions that Rose Quartz was able to form the crystal gems and begin the fight for Earth's future. As Stephen learned more about Pink Diamond's past, he began to see her not just as a mysterious figure, but as a person who had made difficult choices, who had fought for a better future, and who had ultimately shaped the world he now lived in. Pink Diamond's legacy was complicated, filled with contradictions and secrets, but it was also one of profound love and sacrifice. She had given up everything to protect Earth, and in doing so, she had set in motion a chain of events that would change the fate of the gems and the universe itself. As the crystal gems began to build their strength and their mission to protect Earth, they knew that their greatest challenge was not just the diamond's rule, but the diamonds themselves. The conflict with the diamonds had been brewing for millennia, and now, with rose quartz and the crystal gems standing as a beacon of defiance, the battle would become inevitable. The diamonds, despite their powerful reign over the gem homeworld, could not allow a rebellion to flourish, especially one led by a former diamond herself. The diamond's grip on the universe was absolute, and the thought of losing control over a planet as important as Earth was unimaginable. Yellow, blue, and white diamond were more than just rulers. They were symbols of order, perfection, and the strict hierarchy that governed all of Gemkind. Together, they had forged a society based on conformity, a society that crushed individuality and demand for freedom. To the diamonds, a rebellion was not only a threat to their power, but a direct challenge to the very foundation of their beliefs. The existence of the crystal gems, with their unique abilities, their rebellion, and their devotion to a future free of diamond rule, was something they could not tolerate. Each of the diamonds was a force to be reckoned with, and each one presented a unique challenge to the crystal gems. Yellow Diamond's unwavering belief in efficiency and order was matched only by her fierce determination to maintain the status quo. She viewed the gems as tools to be used for her own benefit and saw any deviation from her plan as a flaw to be corrected. Her power was that of control, of unyielding precision, and her immense strength on the battlefield made her a formidable opponent. Blue Diamond, with her deep sorrow and mourning, posed a different kind of threat. Her power wasn't just in her ability to command, it was in her ability to manipulate emotions, to make others feel the weight of their grief and sorrow. Blue Diamond's sense of loss ran deep, and it was this sadness that often clouded her judgment and actions. Her emotional connection to the gems was part of what made her dangerous. Her sorrow could be both a weapon and a vulnerability, and the crystal gems learned to tread carefully around her, knowing that her heart was both her greatest strength and her most profound weakness. But it was White Diamond who represented the ultimate authority. She was the oldest, the most powerful, and the most unyielding of the diamonds. White Diamond's vision of the universe was one of complete perfection, where every gem was aligned with her ideals, and every action taken was part of a perfect, harmonious whole. She believed that all gems should be the same, that individuality was a flaw, and that the only way to achieve true greatness was through complete unity under her rule. White Diamond's power was unmatched. Her ability to manipulate and control the very fabric of the gem universe, making her the most dangerous of all. For the crystal gems, the diamonds represented everything they were fighting against, a system built on control, conformity, and a complete lack of freedom. The conflict with the diamonds was not just a battle of power, it was a battle for the future of Gemkind, for the right of every gem to live as they chose, to have their own identity, and to forge their own path. The crystal gems fought not just for themselves, but for every gem who had ever been subjugated, who had ever been forced into a role they did not choose, who had ever felt the weight of the diamond's oppressive rule. The first significant confrontation between the crystal gems and the diamonds came when Rose Quartz led her rebellion on Earth. Rose, with her powerful conviction and her dream of a world where gems could live freely, faced off against the might of the diamond's forces. This was not just a battle of strength, it was a battle of ideals. The diamonds, with their belief in perfection and order, were horrified by the rebellion, by the idea that gems could defy the natural order of things. For Rose, the rebellion was an act of love, a love for the gems who had suffered under the diamond's reign, and a love for the earth that had become their sanctuary. As the war waged on, the crystal gems fought bravely, each one wielding their unique powers to protect Earth and defend their vision of a free world. Rose Quartz, in her wisdom, knew that this fight was more than just about defeating the diamonds. It was about showing the universe that freedom was worth fighting for. The crystal gems were not just a group of rebels, they were the embodiment of everything the diamonds had feared: independence, love, unity, and hope. For the diamonds, however, their control over the gems was a core tenet of their existence. To lose control of the rebellion meant losing their place at the top of the hierarchy, and it was something they could not accept. They fought ruthlessly, sending wave after wave of their forces to Earth to suppress the crystal gems and their rebellion. Every battle was a test of will, a test of their resolve, and every time the diamonds thought they had won, the crystal gems proved them wrong. Rose's leadership, the strength of Garnet, Amethyst, Pearl, and later Stephen, became a beacon of hope, not just for Earth, but for all gems who had longed for the chance to live as they chose. The conflict with the diamonds was a turning point in the battle for gem freedom, but it was also a story of transformation. As the battle waged on, it became clear that the diamonds were not just tyrants. They were products of a system that had been in place for eons. They had been taught that perfection and control were the only ways to achieve greatness, and they had never known any other way of living. For the crystal gems, defeating the diamonds was not just about victory, it was about changing the very fabric of gem society, about giving every gem the opportunity to choose their own destiny. Through each battle, the crystal gems learned more about themselves, about their powers, and about the true meaning of freedom. The conflict with the diamonds was not just an external struggle, it was an internal one, a struggle to break free from the limitations placed on them by the system they had been born into. The crystal gems, in their own way, represented the possibility of change, of a future where gems could live without fear of oppression. As the war raged on, Rose's rebellion became not just about protecting Earth, but about protecting the very soul of Gemkind. The conflict with the diamonds was far from over, but with each victory, the crystal gems came closer to realizing the world they had always dreamed of, a world where love, unity, and freedom could flourish. The struggle between the crystal gems and the Diamond Authority was never a simple battle of power. It was a war of ideals, a fight for the very essence of what it meant to be a gem. For the crystal gems, the battle was not just about defeating the diamonds, but about reshaping the universe in their image, one where gems were free to choose their own paths, to forge their own identities, and to live without the constant weight of control imposed by the diamonds. The victory of the crystal gems was not just a victory over their oppressors, it was a victory for all gems, for every being who had ever longed for the freedom to live authentically, without fear of judgment or retribution. As the war progressed, it became clear that the crystal gems were not just fighting for their own survival, they were fighting for the future of all gems, for the chance to create a new world where the boundaries between gem and gem and gem and human could be blurred and redefined. Every battle was a step closer to this new world, and every victory, no matter how small, became a symbol of hope for those who had lived under the oppressive rule of the diamonds. Rose Quartz, as the leader of the rebellion, knew that their victory was not guaranteed. The diamonds, with their overwhelming power and vast resources, were formidable adversaries. But Rose also knew that the strength of the crystal gems was not in their individual abilities, but in their unity. It was their love for each other, their trust in one another, and their unwavering belief in the possibility of a better world that gave them the strength to continue, even in the face of impossible odds. The battle for Earth was fought on many fronts. While the Diamond's forces continued to attack, the crystal gems stood firm, using their powers to defend the planet they had come to love. The crystal gems were not just warriors, they were protectors, and they fought not out of hatred for the diamonds, but out of love for Earth, for each other, and for the future they were determined to build. Garnet, with her ability to see the possible futures, played a crucial role in the battle, guiding the crystal gems and helping them navigate the chaos that surrounded them. Her wisdom, calm, and sense of unity were crucial in keeping the team together, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Garnet's ability to foresee outcomes gave the crystal gems a strategic advantage, allowing them to make informed decisions that turned the tide in their favor. Amethyst, ever the free spirit, brought a wild energy to the fight. Her strength and resilience in battle were unmatched, and her shape-shifting powers allowed her to adapt to any situation. Amethyst's ability to embrace change and her willingness to face challenges head-on inspired those around her. She showed the crystal gems that even in the face of overwhelming odds, it was possible to find joy and strength even in the chaos of war. Pearl, the most disciplined and devoted of the crystal gems, was their strategist, using her precision and her ability to create holograms to stay one step ahead of the diamonds. Her power of light manipulation allowed her to defend the crystal gems and to strike at the heart of the Diamond Authority's forces. But Pearl's strength was not just in her ability to fight. It was in her unwavering loyalty to Rose and her belief in the mission of the crystal gems. Pearl's dedication to their cause was what kept the crystal gems grounded, reminding them of why they were fighting in the first place. And then there was Stephen, the son of Rose Quartz, the child who carried the legacy of the crystal gems, was not yet fully aware of the depth of his own power. But as the battle for Earth raged on, Stephen began to realize that his role in the fight was not just about his gem abilities. It was about his ability to connect with others, to heal, and to offer hope. Stephen's power was not in his shield or his healing abilities alone, but in his capacity to inspire those around him, to show them that even in the darkest of times, there was still love, still hope, still the possibility of a better future. It was Stephen's love for Earth, for his friends, and for the crystal gems that ultimately made the difference. While the other gems were fighting with all their strength, Stephen fought with his heart. It was through Stephen's unwavering belief in the power of love that the crystal gems were able to find victory. His ability to heal, to mend, not just the bodies of his friends, but their spirits, was what allowed them to overcome the final obstacle. The diamonds, in their relentless pursuit of control and perfection, could not understand the power of love, and it was this love that became the key to the crystal gems' ultimate success. The final confrontation with the diamonds was not an easy one. The diamonds, despite their overwhelming power, were forced to confront the reality that their control over the universe was slipping away. They had fought to maintain their reign, but in the face of the crystal gems' unity and love, their authority began to crumble. The battle was long and the cost was high, but the crystal gems stood strong, united in their belief that they could create a new world, one where all gems would be free to live as they chose. In the end, it was not through sheer power that the crystal gems won. It was through their unwavering love for each other, for Earth, and for the possibility of a better future. Their victory was not just a military triumph, it was a victory of ideals, a triumph of freedom over oppression, of love over control. The crystal gems had shown the universe that even the most rigid systems could be broken, and that love, unity, and hope were the greatest forces of all. The diamonds, having been defeated, were forced to reckon with the reality that their reign was over. The universe was changing, and the crystal gems had become a symbol of that change, a symbol that the fight for freedom was not over, and that the possibilities for a new world were endless. As the war ended, the crystal gems knew that their work was far from finished. There was much to be done to rebuild the world they had fought for, but they had won the most important victory of all, the victory of love, freedom, and the right to choose their own path. And with that victory, they knew that the future was theirs to shape. Pearl's past is a tale woven with both devotion and sorrow, a narrative that is as intricate as the gem that resides within her. To understand Pearl's journey is to understand the deep complexities of loyalty, identity, and the struggle for self-worth. She is a gem of extraordinary skill and precision, shaped by her role as a servant to the diamonds, and later as a fierce protector of rose quartz and the crystal gems. Yet behind her poised exterior and unwavering commitment to the crystal gems lies a past full of pain, sacrifice, and a longing to understand who she truly is. Pearl's origins can be traced back to the gem homeworld, where she was created to serve the diamond authority. Pearls, like the one that she was, were not intended to be anything more than servants. There were no illusions about their purpose. Pearls were loyal attendants, meticulously trained to perform their duties with grace and obedience. They were not meant to question their roles, and their identities were shaped by their service. For Pearl, this was the life she had known for eons. Her value was tied directly to her ability to serve, to be perfect, to fulfill the exacting demands of her superiors. However, Pearl was never like the other pearls. Even in her early days, before her connection to rose quartz, there was something more within her, something that made her more than just a servant. Her precision and skill were unmatched, her intellect sharp, and her ability to adapt was exceptional. But Pearl's greatest strength, and also her greatest flaw, was her desire for perfection. She longed to please, to be worthy of love and admiration. She was driven by a need to be accepted, to find her place in a world that had defined her existence in terms of servitude. It was during her service to the diamonds that Pearl encountered rose quartz for the first time. Rose, with her fiery passion and her dreams of a better world, was everything that Pearl had never dared to be. Rose was bold, free, and unafraid to challenge the system that had ruled gem society for eons. Pearl's initial encounter with Rose was one of awe and reverence. Rose embodied everything that Pearl longed for: strength, purpose, and most importantly, a sense of self. Rose didn't need to be perfect. She didn't need to live up to the expectations set by the diamonds. Instead, Rose followed her heart and fought for the future she believed in. Pearl's devotion to Rose grew quickly and deeply. In Rose, Pearl saw a reflection of the person she could be, someone who didn't have to conform to the rigid expectations of the gem homeworld. It was with Rose that Pearl found a new sense of purpose, a new understanding of what it meant to be more than just a tool for others. Rose didn't demand perfection from Pearl. She demanded loyalty, trust, and the freedom to be herself. In return, Pearl gave Rose everything she had: her unwavering loyalty, her strength, and her love. But Pearl's devotion to Rose came at a cost. Rose was not just a leader of the rebellion, she was also a symbol of change, a change that Pearl had to embrace. As Rose's closest confidant, Pearl was by her side through every moment of the rebellion, from the early whispers of defiance to the final battles against the diamonds. Pearl helped Rose fight for the freedom of the gems, even though it meant going against everything she had been taught. It meant defying the diamond authority, breaking the rules that had defined her existence, and ultimately shattering the very foundation of the world she had known. Throughout the rebellion, Pearl's feelings for Rose grew deeper, and the bond between them became more than just that of leader and servant. Pearl's love for Rose was not just an allegiance to a cause, it was a deep, unspoken devotion that transcended words. Rose, in turn, cared for Pearl deeply, but their relationship was complicated. Rose, as a leader, had to maintain a distance, keeping the needs of the rebellion above personal attachments. For Pearl, this was one of her greatest struggles. She loved Rose with all her heart, but Rose could never fully return that love in the way Pearl wanted. Rose's heart was not bound to one gem. It was bound to the entire world they were fighting to save. Pearl's past is filled with this quiet, often painful love. She was not just fighting for Rose and the crystal gems. She was fighting for herself, for the chance to be someone more than just a servant. Yet the weight of this love was heavy. And when Rose made the ultimate sacrifice to give birth to Stephen, Pearl was left devastated. Rose had given up everything for the future of the gems, and in doing so, she left behind a legacy that Pearl would have to carry alone. After Rose's departure, Pearl's sense of self was shattered. She had spent so long defining herself by her love for Rose, by her loyalty to the cause, that she didn't know how to be without her. Pearl's pain was compounded by the fact that Stephen, Rose's son, was now her responsibility. To Pearl, Stephen was a living reminder of everything she had lost. While she loved him dearly, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was not enough to fill the void that Rose had left behind. Her struggles with Stephen's place in the world were not just about guiding him to become a great leader. They were about reconciling her feelings of inadequacy and guilt about living up to the ideals that Rose had set. Despite her inner turmoil, Pearl remained dedicated to Stephen and the crystal gems. She became a mother figure to him, though her love for him was complicated by her grief. Pearl's need for control and perfection often clashed with Stephen's free-spirited nature. While Stephen was still learning what it meant to be both a gem and a human, Pearl was grappling with the idea that her own identity, her own value, was not bound to the past. She had to learn that her worth was not tied to her service, to Rose or the diamonds. It was tied to who she was as a person, a gem, and a part of the crystal gems. In the end, Pearl's journey is one of acceptance. She learns that perfection is not the key to happiness, that love and loyalty do not require sacrifice to the point of losing oneself. Pearl's greatest lesson is that it is okay to be imperfect, to make mistakes, and to grow. She learns that, while Rose's legacy will always be a part of her, she does not have to live in Rose's shadow. Pearl's past shaped who she became, but it does not define who she is. Garnet is one of the most fascinating and enigmatic figures in the Steven Universe world. As the fusion of ruby and sapphire, Garnet represents the harmonious union of two very distinct personalities. Ruby, impulsive and fiery, is driven by instinct and emotion, while Sapphire, calm and contemplative, is guided by logic and foresight. Together, they form Garnet, a being of unparalleled strength, wisdom, and balance. But Garnet's true power is not just in her fusion, it lies in her extraordinary ability to see into the future. Future vision is one of Garnet's most defining abilities, a gift that allows her to foresee multiple possible outcomes of any given situation. With a mere glance, she can perceive the endless possibilities that lie ahead, offering her the ability to make informed decisions in moments of great uncertainty. To the crystal gems, Garnet's power is invaluable, guiding their actions and ensuring that they are prepared for whatever challenges lie ahead. But while future vision is an extraordinary gift, it is also a burden, one that Garnet carries with a deep sense of responsibility and understanding. Garnet's ability to see the future is not just a tool for strategic advantage, it is a reflection of her deep connection to Ruby and Sapphire and to the unity they share as one being. Ruby and Sapphire, as individual gems, have very different perspectives on life. Ruby's impulsive nature often leads her to act first and think later, while Sapphire's careful, calculated approach is rooted in a deep understanding of the world around her. Together, they form Garnet, a being who is not just a fusion of power, but a fusion of vision and wisdom. For Garnet, future vision is more than just a gift. It is a way to make sense of a world that is constantly changing, a world full of uncertainties and challenges. While Garnet can see the future, she cannot always control it. The future is not set in stone. It is a fluid and ever changing landscape shaped by the choices made in the present. For Garnet, this means that her ability to see the future is both a blessing and a curse. She can offer guidance, but she cannot always predict every outcome. The future she sees is just one of many possible realities, and each choice made by the crystal gems can alter the course of events. One of the most profound aspects of Garnet's future vision is the way it shapes her relationship with Ruby and Sapphire. As a fusion, Garnet is the perfect balance between their personalities, a synthesis of their strengths and weaknesses. Ruby's raw energy and passion are tempered by Sapphire's calm and measured wisdom. Together, they form a being who is both grounded and visionary, who can act decisively while maintaining a deep understanding of the consequences of those actions. Garnet's future vision is a manifestation of this balance, a power that allows her to see the world not only through her own eyes, but through the eyes of Ruby and Sapphire as well. Garnet's ability to foresee the future is not limited to moments of conflict or battle. It is also a tool for understanding the emotional landscapes of those around her. Garnet's future vision allows her to see the potential for growth, for healing, and for change in others. She can sense the emotional currents that run through the crystal gems and offer guidance on how they can navigate the complex dynamics of their relationships. Her vision extends beyond the physical realm to the emotional and spiritual connections that bind them together. For Stephen, Garnet's future vision is both a source of inspiration and a reminder of the complexities of fate. As a young gem growing into his own powers, Stephen often struggles with the weight of his heritage and the expectations placed upon him. He looks to Garnet as a role model, as someone who has mastered the balance between strength and compassion, between action and reflection. But Stephen also grapples with the idea that the future is not set. He knows that his own choices, his own actions, will shape the world around him. Garnet's ability to see the future is a reminder that while the future may be uncertain, it is still something that can be influenced by the choices they make today. Garnet's role as the leader of the crystal gems is intricately tied to her future vision. While the other gems are often guided by their emotions and instincts, Garnet's calm presence and foresight provide a stabilizing force within the group. She is the one who can see the big picture, who understands the long-term consequences of their actions. Garnet's future vision allows her to make decisions that might seem difficult in the moment, but are ultimately in the best interest of the crystal gems and their mission. It is through her leadership that the crystal gems are able to navigate the many challenges they face, both external and internal. However, future vision also forces Garnet to confront the limitations of her power. Despite her ability to foresee multiple outcomes, there is still much that remains beyond her control. She cannot predict every choice that the crystal gems will make, nor can she always foresee the emotional dynamics that will shape their actions. Garnet's future vision is a tool, but it is not infallible. This realization is one of the most profound aspects of her journey, a recognition that while the future is full of possibilities, it is ultimately shaped by the choices they make in the present. As the story unfolds, Garnet's future vision evolves. It becomes a symbol not just of foresight, but of the trust that Ruby and Sapphire place in each other. Their fusion is an act of love, a deep commitment to one another that allows them to transcend their individual selves and create something greater. Garnet's future vision is a reflection of this love, a love that spans time and space, a love that guides them through the darkest moments and illuminates the path forward. Through Garnet, Stephen learns that the future is not something to be feared or controlled. It is something to be shaped, something to be embraced with love and hope. Garnet's future vision teaches him that while the future may be uncertain, it is still something they can influence with the choices they make today. It is through love, unity, and the courage to face the unknown that the crystal gems will continue to move forward, creating a world where all gems are free to choose their own destinies. Amethyst is a gem whose journey is as wild and unpredictable as her nature. She was created on the gem homeworld, not through the careful, deliberate processes that shaped other gems, but rather in a more chaotic, spontaneous manner. Amethyst was born as an experiment, a creation that did not fit neatly into the rigid structure of the gem society. She was different from the other gems, and this difference would define her journey, a journey of self-discovery, of learning to embrace her unique identity, and of finding her place in a world that often seemed too constraining. From the moment Amethyst was introduced, it was clear that she was a force of nature. She was free-spirited, fun-loving, and sometimes a little reckless. Unlike some of the more disciplined gems like Pearl and Garnet, Amethyst wasn't afraid to push boundaries, to break the rules, and to live life on her own terms. But underneath her carefree attitude, Amethyst carried a deep sense of insecurity. She had always felt like an outsider, someone who didn't quite fit into the mold that gem society had created. This feeling of being different was a source of both strength and pain for Amethyst, and it shaped much of her journey. Amethyst's origins on the gem homeworld were marked by a sense of abandonment. Unlike other gems, who were created for specific roles, Amethyst was essentially a product of the gem homeworld's desire for mass production. She was made to serve, to mine, to work, without any true consideration for her individuality. This lack of purpose, combined with the way she was created in a much more spontaneous and less carefully controlled process, left Amethyst feeling like she didn't belong. She was different, and this difference became a part of her identity. When rose quartz and the crystal gems found Amethyst, she had already spent years as an outsider. She had been created in a place where she didn't feel valued, where she was simply another tool to be used. Yet when Rose found Amethyst, it was clear that she was more than just a tool. She was a gem with potential, with personality, and with a deep well of untapped strength. Rose saw in Amethyst something that no one on the gem homeworld had ever seen, someone worthy of freedom, someone who could be more than just a worker or a servant. Joining the crystal gems was the beginning of a new chapter for Amethyst. She found a place where she wasn't just an experiment or a tool to be used. She found a family. The crystal gems accepted her for who she was, flaws and all. Garnet, Pearl, and Rose embraced Amethyst's differences, and in doing so, they gave her the freedom to be herself. For Amethyst, this acceptance was transformative. She had always felt that she was an outsider, but with the crystal gems, she found a sense of belonging. She realized that she didn't have to fit into anyone else's mold. She could be wild, she could be carefree, and she could still be valuable. However, this sense of belonging didn't erase all of Amethyst's insecurities. Despite her outward confidence and playful demeanor, she struggled with feelings of inadequacy. She had always felt like she wasn't as good as the other gems, that she didn't measure up to their standards of perfection. Amethyst had often been compared to the other gems, and she believed that, because of the way she was created, she was somehow inferior. This belief in her own inadequacy haunted her, and it was something she struggled to overcome. Over time, Amethyst began to realize that her worth was not tied to her creation or her ability to be perfect. She learned that she was valuable because of who she was, not because she fit into a certain mold. Amethyst began to embrace her uniqueness, to see her differences as a source of strength. Her ability to shapeshift, her raw power, her unfiltered personality, these were all things that made her who she was. And while she was not always perfect, she was still worthy of love, acceptance, and respect. Amethyst's journey was not just one of external battles, but also of internal growth. She learned to come to terms with her past, to let go of the guilt and insecurity that had weighed her down. She began to understand that being different was not something to hide or be ashamed of, it was something to celebrate. Amethyst learned that true strength comes not from perfection, but from the ability to accept oneself, flaws and all, and to keep moving forward in the face of adversity. As Amethyst grew more comfortable in her own skin, she also began to understand the importance of her relationships with others. The crystal gems, especially Stephen, became a source of great support for Amethyst. Stephen, who had his own struggles with identity and self worth, was able to see through Amethyst's bravado and recognize the vulnerability beneath. He saw that despite her playful nature, Amethyst was struggling with her own sense of inadequacy, and he helped her confront those feelings. Through Stephen, Amethyst learned that it was okay to ask for help, that it was okay to be vulnerable, and that being strong didn't mean hiding one's weaknesses. Amethyst's journey was also a journey of embracing change. She had spent so much of her life believing that she was destined to be an outsider, that she couldn't be anything more than a product of her creation. But as she grew and learned to accept herself, Amethyst began to see that she had the power to shape her own destiny. She wasn't bound by her past. She had the ability to create a future where she could be herself, completely and unapologetically. Through her time with the crystal gems, Amethyst learned that being unique was not a weakness, it was a strength. Her journey, while full of challenges and setbacks, ultimately showed her that she was more than her past, more than her creation, and more than the expectations placed upon her. Amethyst was a force of nature, wild and untamed, but also deeply loved and accepted for exactly who she was. The bond between Stephen and Connie is one of the most heartfelt and enduring relationships in Steven Universe. At the heart of their connection is not just mutual respect and understanding, but also a deep, unwavering friendship that grows stronger with every trial they face together. While Stephen's journey has often been defined by his unique position as both a gem and a human, Connie's role in his life is just as significant. She is his closest friend, confidant, and partner, someone who helps him navigate the complexities of his dual identity and the responsibilities that come with being a crystal gem. Their friendship begins in a simple and unassuming way. Connie Maheswaran, a young girl with a deep love for books, is first introduced to Stephen during a chance encounter. Despite their differences, Stephen being a gem with strange powers and Connie being a human with no knowledge of the supernatural, the two quickly form a bond. Connie is drawn to Stephen's kindness and his earnest desire to do good in the world, while Stephen is captivated by Connie's intelligence, her love for adventure, and the way she challenges him to think critically about the world around him. What begins as an innocent friendship soon develops into a partnership, one where Stephen and Connie support one another in ways that are both tender and powerful. For Stephen, Connie represents the human side of him, the part that is grounded, that seeks connection and understanding in a way that transcends the complexities of his gem powers. Connie, in turn, finds in Stephen a friend who accepts her for who she is, someone who values her as a person rather than seeing her as a mere bystander to the world of gems and magic. As the series progresses, Stephen and Connie's relationship deepens. They share moments of joy, of laughter, and of quiet understanding. They spend hours talking together, exploring the world, and learning from one another. But their bond also grows stronger through the challenges they face. When danger looms, when the world around them feels uncertain, it is each other that they turn to for comfort and guidance. One of the most defining aspects of Stephen and Connie's friendship is the way they support each other through their individual struggles. Stephen, as a child of rose quartz, has always carried the weight of his legacy, expectations, ideals, and the complicated nature of being both gem and human. Connie, on the other hand, has her own journey of self discovery. She is not just a sidekick or an observer in Stephen's life. She is a person with her own aspirations, fears, and dreams. And together, they help each other navigate the world and the challenges that come with it. Through Stephen, Connie learns about the complexities of Gemkind and the struggles they face. So she becomes more than just an outsider to the crystal gems. She becomes a vital part of their community, fighting alongside them in battles and learning about the importance of unity, friendship, and love. For Connie, Stephen's world is one of both awe and responsibility, and she gradually becomes an essential figure in the fight for freedom and peace for both gems and humans. But Stephen also learns from Connie. She teaches him the value of knowledge, of thinking before acting, and the importance of understanding the perspectives of others. While Stephen's instincts often drive him to act impulsively, Connie helps him slow down, think things through, and find the deeper meaning behind the battles they face. Connie's strength lies not in physical power, but in her intellectual and emotional depth. She helps Stephen see the bigger picture, encouraging him to question what he has always known and to challenge his assumptions about the world around him. Their bond is also symbolized by the fusion of their strengths. In one of the most emotional and symbolic moments of Steven Universe, Stephen and Connie fuse together to become Stevani. This fusion represents not just the combination of their physical abilities, but the merging of their personalities, their fears, and their hopes. Stevani is a reflection of everything they are together, strong, confident, and capable of overcoming any challenge. Through Stevani, Stephen and Connie experience firsthand the power of their connection, and the realization that together they can accomplish anything. In many ways, Stevani represents the ideal of their friendship. It is a fusion that is not forced, but one that arises naturally from the trust and love they share. When they become Stevani, it is not just about their physical abilities, it is about the emotional and psychological bond that connects them. Stevani is a perfect balance between Stephen's warmth and Connie's wisdom, a reflections of their ability to complement each other and form something greater than themselves. Through their friendship, Stephen and Connie also learn about the complexities of growing up and becoming who they are meant to be. As they both mature, they face new challenges that test the strength of their bond. Connie, who once relied on her parents and the structure of her life, begins to assert her independence, stepping into her own identity. Stephen, too, continues to learn more about his powers, his heritage, and his place in the world. Together, they navigate the ups and downs of adolescence, supporting each other through every step of the way. Their relationship also challenges the boundaries between gem and human, showing that despite their differences, there is a deep connection between them that transcends species, culture, and even the universe itself. In a world that often seeks to divide, Stephen and Connie's friendship is a beacon of unity, illustrating the possibility of peace, its collaboration, and mutual respect between the two worlds. While their journey is far from over, Stephen and Connie's bond is one that will last a lifetime. It is a friendship that is tested by time, by battle, and by personal growth, but one that continues to strengthen as they both evolve. Through Stephen and Connie, Steven Universe shows that true friendship is not just about standing by each other in the good times, but about supporting each other in the hardest moments, growing together, and becoming better versions of themselves. The Diamonds had been the undisputed rulers of the Gem homeworld, controlling the Gem society with absolute power and rigid hierarchy. For eons, their rule had been unchallenged, with their authority extending across the universe. When Rose Quartz led the rebellion, the crystal gems managed to shift the balance of power, but the Diamond's influence was not easily erased. Though the crystal gems achieved victory, the legacy of the Diamonds remained a lingering presence, an echo of the past that shaped much of Gemkin's future. The return of the Diamonds was not something that the crystal gems had anticipated, nor was it something they were prepared for. For Stephen and the Gems, the return of the Diamonds represented not just the reemergence of an old threat, but the rekindling of a deep, unresolved conflict. It was a return to the very ideals that the crystal gems had fought against for so long: the need for control, the desire to impose order, and the belief that gems were mere tools to serve the Diamond's will. The Diamond's return wasn't a simple matter of physical force or military might. It was an emotional and philosophical struggle. The Diamonds, yellow, blue, and white, had faced their own challenges in the wake of their loss of power, but their return signified that they had not been defeated in the way that the crystal gems had hoped. Their ideas of perfection, order, and unity still held sway, and they were not easily swayed from their belief that Gemkin could only thrive under their control. Yellow Diamond's return was marked by her sheer force of will. As the most pragmatic of the Diamonds, Yellow's strength lay in her sense of efficiency and control. She had never been one to entertain emotional weakness, and she viewed the Crystal Gems rebellion as nothing more than a blemish on Gemkind's perfect system. Yellow Diamond's return was about restoring order, ensuring that the gems would once again fall into line and serve the greater purpose of the Diamond Authority. She believed that the rebellion had been a temporary disruption, one that could be erased with enough power and influence. Blue Diamond's return, however, was more complex. Her sorrow, which had defined her character, was no less intense after the rebellion. Her grief over the loss of Pink Diamond had never fully abated, and with the revelation that Pink Diamond had faked her death, Blue Diamond's sorrow only deepened. Yet within this sorrow was also a sense of determination. Blue Diamond was not just fighting for the return of her power. She was fighting for the redemption of the diamonds themselves. To her, the loss of Pink Diamond had not only been a personal tragedy, but a symbol of the failure of their entire way of life. Her return was a mixture of mourning and resolve. She wanted to restore the diamond's authority, but she also wanted to prove that Gemkind could still find a way to heal from the pain they had caused. White Diamond, the most powerful and authoritarian of the diamonds, represented the ultimate challenge for the crystal gems. Her vision of a perfect, unified gem society, where all gems were one in mind and purpose, had long been her ideal. White Diamond's return was marked by her unyielding belief that the universe could only thrive if gems were perfectly aligned under her control. Her vision was uncompromising, and it sought to eliminate all that did not fit her ideal of perfection. For White Diamond, the return of the crystal gems and their fight for freedom was an act of rebellion against the very foundation of her beliefs. To her, freedom was chaos, and only through absolute order could Gemkind achieve greatness. For Stephen, the return of the diamonds was an intensely personal journey. As the son of rose quartz, Stephen had spent his life grappling with the complexities of his mother's legacy, the rebellion she had started, the freedom she had fought for, and the world she had left behind. The return of the diamonds was a reminder of the unresolved conflict that had shaped his entire existence. His struggle was not just with the diamonds, but with the ideals they represented. He had inherited the dreams and the battles of rose quartz, and now he was faced with the challenge of carrying that legacy forward. The diamonds' return forced Stephen to confront the reality that their battle was far from over. While he had hoped that the end of the war had marked the beginning of a peaceful future, the return of the diamonds reminded him that the fight for freedom and self-determination was an ongoing struggle. The world he had fought to protect was not yet safe, and the ideals of the diamonds still held sway over many gems. The return of the diamonds meant that Stephen and the crystal gems would have to rise to the challenge once again. However, Stephen's journey was different from Rose Quartz's. He had learned from his mother's legacy and had the benefit of understanding the emotional and spiritual dimensions of the conflict. Stephen was not just fighting for freedom, he was fighting for understanding, for reconciliation, and for the possibility that even the diamonds could change. It was a deeply philosophical struggle, as Stephen sought to balance his desire to protect the gems with his belief that love, empathy, and understanding could lead to healing, even for the diamonds. As the conflict with the diamonds unfolded, Stephen realized that the future was not just a battle between the forces of freedom and the forces of control. It was a battle for the hearts and minds of the gems. The diamonds, despite their immense power, were not invincible. Their power lay in their ability to control and manipulate Gemkind, but their return showed that even they were susceptible to change. The return of the diamonds forced Stephen and the crystal gems to ask difficult questions. Was it possible to reconcile with the diamonds? Could they change, or were they forever defined by their past actions? And what did victory truly mean in a world that was as complicated and imperfect as the one they all inhabited? For the crystal gems, the return of the diamonds was a reminder that their work was not yet complete. The road to freedom was long, and the cost of peace was high. But for Stephen, it was also a reminder that change was possible, that even the most entrenched systems could be redefined if enough people were willing to fight for it. The battle for Gemkind's future was just beginning, and Stephen and the crystal gems would be at the forefront of that fight, not only for their own freedom, but for the possibility of a better world for all gems. The crystal gems have always been more than just a group of rebels. They are the embodiment of a new vision for Gemkind, one built on love, freedom, and the right to choose one's own destiny. Their journey is not just about defeating the diamonds or fighting for control of the universe. It is about creating a future where gems can live freely without the oppressive rule of the diamonds, where they can form their own identities, and where the mistakes of the past can be healed. The legacy of the crystal gems is one of hope, perseverance, and the belief that change is not only possible, but necessary. From their earliest days, the crystal gems set out to create something new, a family built not on hierarchy and control, but on love and mutual respect. Rose Quartz, their leader, was the catalyst for this movement, inspiring the gems to see that they could be more than just tools to be used by the diamonds. She saw in them the potential for something greater, something that could transcend the rigid confines of the gem homeworld. Rose believed that gems, no matter their origin or purpose, deserved the right to live as they chose, and it was this belief that formed the foundation of the Crystal Gems mission. But Rose's legacy was not one that came easily. Her decision to rebel against the diamonds was not only an act of defiance, but one of great sacrifice. She knew that her actions would come with consequences, that the fight for freedom would cost her dearly, and yet she was willing to give up everything, including her own life, to ensure that the future she dreamed of could become a reality. Her sacrifice was a powerful reminder that change is never easy, that the road to freedom is filled with struggle, pain, and loss. The crystal gems continued Rose's mission long after her passing, each of them carrying their own unique burdens and struggles, yet united by the same cause. Garnet, Amethyst, Pearl, and Stephen each brought their own strengths, perspectives, and experiences to the fight, shaping the legacy of the crystal gems in ways that Rose could never have imagined. Each of them had their own reasons for joining the rebellion, their own reasons for continuing the fight after Rose was gone, but what united them was their shared belief that Gemkind deserved better than the system the diamonds had imposed upon them. Garnet's strength was not only in her physical power, but in her wisdom. As the fusion of ruby and sapphire, she represented the ultimate balance between love and logic, passion and reason. Garnet's leadership was a guiding force for the crystal gems, and her ability to foresee the future allowed them to plan and navigate the dangers they faced. But her power wasn't just about prediction, it was about understanding, empathy, and the belief that the future could be shaped by the choices they made today. Garnet's role as a leader was a testament to the power of unity, to the strength that comes from coming together in love and purpose. Amethyst, on the other hand, brought a wild energy to the crystal gems, a reminder that freedom could also come from embracing one's imperfections and flaws. Amethyst had always struggled with her sense of self worth, feeling that she was never as good as the other gems, never as strong, never as perfect. Yet over time, Amethyst learned that her worth was not defined by perfection, but by her willingness to fight for what was right. Her playful, carefree attitude was a source of strength, reminding the crystal gems that they could find joy and humor in even the darkest of times. Amethyst's journey was one of self acceptance, of learning to embrace her uniqueness, and it became an integral part of the crystal gem's legacy. Pearl, with her deep sense of duty and perfectionism, was a constant force of stability and structure within the group. She had spent so much of her existence defined by her role as a servant to the diamonds. But when she joined the crystal gems, she discovered that she could be more. Pearl's transformation was one of the most profound within the group. She learned to balance her intense loyalty with the ability to question authority, to let go of her need for perfection and accept herself for who she was. Pearl's journey was about letting go of the past and learning to embrace the future, a future that was not defined by the expectations placed on her, but by her own choices. And then there was Stephen. As the son of rose quartz, Stephen's journey was different from the others. He was born into a legacy that he hadn't asked for, one that came with expectations and burdens that he could hardly comprehend. For Stephen, the Crystal Gem's legacy was not just about continuing the fight for freedom. It was about learning who he was, how he fit into the world, and what kind of person he wanted to be. Stephen's journey was one of self discovery, of reconciling the duality of his human and gem sides, and of learning that he didn't have to live in his mother's shadow to honor her memory. His legacy was about healing, both for himself and for others, and about creating a world where love, compassion, and understanding were the true measures of strength. Together, the crystal gems became more than just a group of rebels. They became a family bound by love, shared purpose, and a belief in the possibility of change. Their legacy is one of resistance, but also of transformation. They did not just fight to defeat the diamonds, they fought to create a world where gems could be free to choose their own destinies, where they could form their own identities, and where love and unity were more powerful than the systems of control and oppression that had once ruled them. The crystal gems' legacy lives on in the world they fought to protect. Earth, the planet they had once defended against the forces of the Diamond Authority, became a symbol of hope and possibility for all gems. It was a place where the ideals of freedom, individuality, and love could flourish. And while their battle was long and hard, the crystal gems knew that their legacy would not just be defined by their victories, but by the future they had created for the gems who came after them. Their story is one of courage, sacrifice, and the belief that a better world is always worth fighting for. It is a legacy that will live on in the hearts of all who believe in the power of love and the strength that comes from unity. The crystal gem's journey is not over because the world they fought to create is one that will continue to evolve, to grow, and to inspire others to carry on the fight for freedom and love. In the world of Steven Universe, the concept of home is not just about a physical place, it's a symbol of belonging, connection, and purpose. For Stephen and the Crystal Gems, home represents more than just a structure or a piece of land. It is a sanctuary, a place where they can be themselves, where they can share their love and their pain, and where they find strength in one another. Home is where they create their own identities, not defined by the constraints of gem society, but by the bonds they form with each other and the world around them. For Stephen, the idea of home has always been fluid, ever changing. Born of both gem and human origins, Stephen never had the same simple definition of home that many might take for granted. His very existence is a blend of two worlds, one that is both beautiful and complicated. While many people might define home by a house or a place to live, Stephen's home is a reflection of the people he loves, the crystal gems, and the world he strives to protect. When Stephen first arrived at the Crystal Gems home, Beach City, he found more than just a place to live. He found a family. Garnet, Pearl, and Amethyst welcomed him into their fold, each of them shaping his understanding of what home could be. While he had once believed that his home might be defined by his heritage, by the legacy of his mother, Rose Quartz, he began to understand that home was not a singular thing. It was something that grew, that evolved with him as he learned more about himself and the people around him. The Gems home, their base of operations within Beach City, has always been more than just a shelter. It's a place of learning, growth, and community. It's the temple, the Crystal Temple, and it represents the ideals the Crystal Gems stand for: freedom, love, and the belief in one's right to exist as they truly are. It is within these walls that Stephen learned about his powers, his heritage, and the strength of his family. It was here that he began to understand what it meant to be a gem, a human, and a protector of Earth. Garnet, Pearl, and Amethyst each brought something unique to the space. Garnet's calm and collected leadership was a stabilizing force, always guiding the crystal gems with wisdom. Pearl's disciplined, perfectionist nature lent itself to the structure and the order of their lives, while Amethyst's free-spirited, playful energy injected life and laughter into their days. Together, they created a home where Stephen could feel safe, where he could learn, and where he could explore his unique role in the universe. But beyond the Crystal Gems base, Beach City itself also became an extension of Stephen's home. As he grew closer to the people of Beach City, Connie, Greg, the townspeople, he began to see that home wasn't just defined by the crystal gems or even the temple. It was defined by the connections he made with others. Beach City became a place of comfort and community, a place where Stephen could share his life with others, where he could help and be helped, and where he could learn about the complexities of human existence. The town, in its quiet and humble way, became just as much a part of Stephen's home as the Crystal Gems sanctuary. One of the most profound moments in Stephen's journey comes when he begins to realize that home is not just a physical space. It's a state of mind, a feeling of belonging and being understood. This realization comes with the understanding that home is not something that is given to you. It's something that you create for yourself with the people you love, the relationships you build, and the actions you take to make the world around you a better place. For the crystal gems, the concept of home is equally complex. They were once scattered across the gem homeworld, created for specific purposes, bound by the strict hierarchy of the Diamond Authority. Their lives were defined by their roles: warrior, servant, laborer, until rose quartz brought them together to form the crystal gems. Rose created a new kind of family, one that was based not on duty or servitude, but on mutual respect, love, and the shared desire for freedom. Through Rose Quartz's vision, the crystal gems discovered that they could create a home for themselves, one where they could be free from the constraints of their past. The crystal gems' home, their sanctuary, became a symbol of their rebellion, their defiance against a system that sought to control and define them. It was a space where they could live authentically, without fear of judgment or reprisal, and where they could find solace in one another's company. This sense of belonging was what gave the crystal gems the strength to continue their fight for freedom and equality, and it was what allowed them to build the foundation for a new world where all gems could be free to define themselves. For garnets, pearl, and amethyst, their home was a space of healing. Each of them had their own personal struggles. Garnet had her past as two individual gems, ruby and sapphire, forced to come together and create something new. Pearl had to come to terms with her past as a servant to the diamonds and the loss of her leader, Rose Quartz. And Amethyst had to learn to embrace her imperfections and accept herself as a gem, rather than seeing herself as flawed or lesser than the others. It was within the home they had created together that they could work through these issues, finding peace and strength in each other's support. But for Stephen, the meaning of home goes beyond the personal. It is also about the larger world he is trying to protect. As he grows and learns, he realizes that home is not just about the place where you live, but the world around you. Earth is his home, and it is a world worth fighting for. The more Stephen learns about the planet, the more he understands the beauty and fragility of the life that exists here. Home is the people, the creatures, the ecosystems, and the history that make Earth unique, and it is worth protecting from those who would seek to destroy or control it. In many ways, Stephen's journey is about expanding his understanding of home, about learning to accept the love and support that comes from others, but also about taking responsibility for the world around him. His sense of home is no longer just a place, but a sense of belonging in the greater context of the universe. He understands that his actions, his choices, and his love for others all contribute to the kind of world he will leave behind. The concept of home also teaches Stephen the importance of community. He cannot protect Earth or the people he loves alone. It is only through the bonds he forms with others, whether it's the crystal gems, Connie, Greg, or the citizens of Beach City, that Stephen can truly create the world he wants to see. Home is not just where you live, it is who you are with and the connections you nurture in the world around you. The legacy of Rose Quartz is one of the most complex and emotionally charged aspects of Steven Universe. To those who knew her, Rose was more than just a leader. She was a symbol of love, rebellion, and sacrifice. Her vision of a world where gems could live freely and without fear of oppression, inspired the crystal gems to fight against the Diamond Authority, but her legacy also carried with it deep questions and unresolved truths. For Stephen, understanding the legacy of rose quartz was an essential part of his journey, as he sought to reconcile his identity as both her son and his own person with his own path to forge. Rose quartz was a leader of the crystal gems, but she was not a typical ruler. She did not seek power for its own sake, nor did she desire to control others. Instead, she fought for the freedom of all gems, believing deeply in the idea that every gem, no matter their creation, had the right to choose their own path. It was this belief that led her to lead the rebellion against the Diamond Authority, to fight for a world where gems could live freely on their own terms, without fear of being controlled or dictated to by the diamonds. Her decision to rebel was not born out of anger or hatred for the diamonds, but out of a desire for change. Rose saw the beauty in every gem, and she believed that each one had a purpose beyond the roles they had been assigned. For Rose, the gems were not mere tools or soldiers. They were individuals with the right to define their own existence. This belief was revolutionary in a society that had long been structured around rigid hierarchies, and it was this belief that drove Rose to take up arms against the diamonds. The rebellion was not easy, and it came with many sacrifices. Rose knew that the path she had chosen would not be without its hardships, but she also knew that the fight for freedom was worth it. The crystal gems under her leadership faced countless battles against the might of the Diamond Authority. Yet through it all, Rose remained steadfast in her belief that the future of Gemkind could be different, that they could break free from the control of the diamonds and create a world where freedom, love, and individuality could thrive. However, Rose's legacy is complicated. The more Stephen learned about her, the more he realized that Rose's choices were not without consequences. While she had led the rebellion with the best of intentions, her actions had also caused pain, loss, and heartbreak. Rose's decision to shatter Pink Diamond, one of the diamonds, was a key moment in the rebellion, a moment that would shape the future of Gemkind. But this act of defiance also left a deep emotional scar on the gems, especially on those who had followed Rose, and on the diamonds themselves. The revelation that Pink Diamond had faked her death and that Rose had been directly involved in the deception left Stephen grappling with the question of his mother's true intentions. Rose had always been a symbol of love and sacrifice to Stephen, but as he learned more about the truth behind her actions, he began to question whether her rebellion had been as pure and selfless as he had once believed. Was Rose truly the hero he had always imagined her to be? Or was she, too, a flawed individual who had made difficult choices in the name of her vision? For Stephen, this question was not easy to answer. Rose had been his mother, and his love for her was deep. But as he grew older and began to understand the complexities of the world, he realized that no one, not even his mother, was perfect. Rose had made mistakes, and her legacy was not one of unblemished heroism. It was one of sacrifice, struggle, and the constant balancing of love and duty. Stephen had to come to terms with the fact that Rose's legacy was both beautiful and painful, inspiring and complicated. One of the most difficult aspects of understanding Rose's legacy was the realization that Rose had been a leader, but she had also been a person with her own desires, dreams, and flaws. Rose's decision to give up her physical form to create Stephen was an act of ultimate sacrifice, but it was also an act of personal longing. She had chosen to bring a new life into the world, to pass on her legacy through Stephen, but in doing so, she had left behind the gems who had fought alongside her. Rose's decision to leave behind her physical form raised difficult questions about her commitment to the rebellion and the crystal gems. Was her desire to create Stephen a final act of love, or a way for her to escape the consequences of her own actions? As Stephen navigated his own identity and his place in the world, he struggled with the weight of Rose's legacy. He wanted to honor his mother's ideals, to continue the fight for freedom and self-determination that Rose had started. But he also realized that he could not live in Rose's shadow forever. He was his own person, with his own path to follow, and he needed to understand that his journey was not defined by his mother's choices. Stephen had to find a way to reconcile his love for Rose with the understanding that he was not bound by her legacy, but rather by his own decisions and his own sense of identity. Stephen's journey was one of self-discovery, and as he learned more about his mother, he also learned more about himself. He learned that Rose's rebellion, while inspiring, was not without its flaws. He learned that even the most well-intentioned actions could have unforeseen consequences, and that no one, not even his mother, was perfect. But in this realization, Stephen also learned that the true power of Rose's legacy was not in her actions, but in the love she had shared with those around her. It was the love that Rose had given to the gems, to Stephen, and into Earth that became the foundation for a new world, one where freedom, love, and unity could thrive. The legacy of Rose Quartz is not one of perfect heroism, but of love and sacrifice. It is a legacy that is still unfolding, as Stephen continues to honor his mother's ideals while creating his own path. It is a legacy that is complex, filled with both joy and sorrow, but one that ultimately teaches Stephen the power of love, the importance of choice, and the strength that comes from embracing one's own identity. Through Rose's legacy, Stephen learns that true heroism lies not in perfection, but in the ability to face the challenges of life with love, compassion, and the courage to grow. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Steven Universe. As you drift off to sleep, may the echoes of Mordecai, Rigby, and their friends' adventures stay with you, reminding you of the importance of friendship, responsibility, and the endless possibilities that life offers. Just as the park itself is filled with surprises, so too is the world around us, a place where growth, change, and laughter can always be found. And as the night deepens, let go of the chaos of the day and embrace the stillness of the moment. Remember, no matter what challenges lie ahead, you have the power to grow, to change, and to shape the world around you. Good night, and may you wake refreshed and ready for the next adventure that awaits.